Oh, the green chair. Look at this. The green answer chair. Hey, everybody. David Burns. Good to be with you. This is raw and unedited. And so I'm just in the green chair this morning, being myself, not able to edit out all the mistakes that I make when I make a video, which hopefully I won't make many. But anyway, going to answer the questions that I didn't get a chance to answer last night during my live stream. We had a great live stream last night, by the way. Thanks for joining me. So many people were with us, and we answered so many different questions. I hear a helicopter. But it's hard to get to all the questions in 59 minutes. I did the best I could, but some of these questions I didn't get to, but they are so good that I'm going to answer them today. Now, when I answer these questions, it's going to be good for you because you might be thinking, oh, that doesn't pertain to me. But it may not now, but it probably will in your future. So these are questions, I mean, you almost need to write these down and keep track of the answer because you're going to be keeping bees one day and that question is going to come up. Let's jump right into it, okay? All right. Mike says, question, are quilt boxes useful or useless? Now, quilt boxes, if you're not familiar with that term, they are a box that's usually associated more with a warre hive, W-A-R-R-E. It's a kind of like a top bar hive, only it's vertical. They use top bars and all the boxes are kind of like a Langstroth vertical configuration. And the top box is usually a quilt box. And a quilt box contains something like a cloth material, fabric, burlap. And then on top of that, inside the box are more like wood chips or other cloth to absorb moisture that happens in the wintertime. Now, this all depends whether they are useful or useless, depends on your hive configuration, Mike. So in a Langstroth, I don't use them because in the wintertime, I use my winter be kind boards that I created, and they're candy boards that absorbs the moisture into the candy so the bees can consume the candy. Two birds with one stone, right? And so I don't have to use a quilt box. I use a winter be kind board. If you were to use a quilt box with a winter be kind, it would be useless because it would go on top of the candy board and it wouldn't work. There would not, all the moisture would be caught in the candy, so it would be a waste of an item up above it. So, but if you're not feeding your bees in the wintertime and you're a strong warre enthusiast, then quilt box is probably your thing. Good question. All right, Phil, about queen cups. Does the queen lay in these or does a worker move an egg or larvae? You know, I've had that question asked several times now on my live stream. And first of all, it's a very good question. I think it's a question that really doesn't matter that much how they do it. It just happens. But I guess curiosity gets us all, doesn't it, Phil? So I like a book. I like an author that wrote a book on, I don't remember the name of the book, but he's a great author. His name is Mark Winston. And Mark, in his book, said that he thought that they moved them, I believe. It's been a while since I read it, but he addressed this. I believe he thought that they do move eggs. I, on the other hand, it's hard for me to believe that. I've tried to move eggs myself, and they're sticky. I think bees could do it, and they might do it. I don't know. I think we need to do an experiment. Dr. John Zavishlak and I had sat down and worked up what we could do to experiment to put this idea to rest, whether they do or they don't. We were going to do it this year, but we never got around to it to do it. But I think an experiment is worthy to be done to see, do bees move eggs into these queen cups, or does the queen lay in those? The literature seems to be split, the scientific literature. I read some that says they move it, some that says no way they don't. So I don't know on that one. Does the smell from aster pollen nectar in the hive dissipate? That strange smell started about 8 days after the flow. Goldenrod, right? Fall asters make such a weird smell. The goldenrod does. Some people say it smells like dirty socks. A lot of new beekeepers fear that it's American foul brood that has a bad odor to it as the bacteria causes the bees to die in their pre-pupae stage. And so I get it. It smells. Does it ever dissipate? It gets less. All aromas, kind of dissipate. But in this case, I've noticed in my hives in the spring, the bees will open up the caps of the capped honey from the fall, which might have been aster, and I'll smell it again in the spring. And there it is again. I was like, oh my gosh, why am I smelling goldenrod now that it's spring? Because they're opening that honey up for food now. They didn't use it all for winter. Kelby, how do you go about overwintering a 5-frame nuke box? They were, They were a midsummer split, and they have a frame and a half of capped honey and plenty of pollen and bee bread. Queen is laying good. Um, Kelby, I don't know where you live, but if you live in a very cold climate, such as mine in Illinois, on the prairie, windy, cold climate here, it's tough to get a 5-frame nuc through winter. I mean, in the case where you're going to try to do it in my climate, you would have to wrap it and feed it all winter to get it to go through winter. I've done it, but it's a lot of work, more work than a bigger colony. So that's the tough part. Now, if you live in the South, way down in the South, you don't have hard winters, it's not going to be as difficult to do that. So it depends on where you live. Gene says, David, prior to winter, do you get rid of drone brood? Now, Gene, that's a good question. No, I let the bees do that. Bees are so good at doing that. A lot of people know that bees will start pushing out their drones now because that's the drone, by the way, is the male honeybee, and they're only used for mating with virgin queens. Mating season is over for the most part. They don't need drones anymore. They push them out because they'll just consume more food in the winter, and they don't need them to eat food in the winter. They'll raise more drones in the spring. But to get back to your question, what about the brood, like larvae, pupae? Well, they'll get rid of that. Some of you have already sent me questions about, what is this? Why are my bees dying? And when I look closer, those of you that are on my Bee Team 6 mentorship program, when I look closer at your pictures, I determine that it's drones that the bees are pulling out. They don't want to raise them, so they're consuming the drone eggs and larvae for protein, and then they're pulling out the pupae and just getting rid of them out of the hive. And so, yeah, they'll get rid of them on their own. I would not bother to get rid of it. However, Gene, I do think there's some advantage of cutting out the capped drone brood and discarding it because you're trapping mites in there. So that could be one benefit. David, have you done more to the tree stump hive you were planning? Oh, no, I haven't, but let me tell you why. A couple of things. I need to find somebody that has, what do you call it? I want to say a sawmill, but it's not a sawmill. It's a thing that has a blade that goes this way, and you can move it through live and unedited. No, it's not live, but it's unedited, raw and unedited. I know the term, but I can't think of it now. But if you have a portable saw where I could set this up and slice into the stump like that, and then what I want to do, the second thing I want to do is move it into my shop. I'm reworking my shop to encompass more projects like this. So if I can get my shop reworked, then I would like to make that my winter project. So in other words, I'll get the stump and wood and all ready, and then in the spring, with an overwinter colony, I can tear it apart and put an overwinter colony in there. See how it goes in the spring. I hate to do it now, it's so late in the year. So I'm still working on it, just trying to figure out all the little logistics of making it happen, that's for sure. JR, hey, how are you doing, JR? I'm combining hives now to do queen issues. Oh, due to queen issues. Any suggestions on how to get them down to 2 doubles, currently at 3 deep on the combined hive? Yeah, here's the deal with that, JR. I'm in the same boat when I combine hives. What you want to do is you'll wind up, let's say you have 2 deeps and you decide to put a weak hive, newspaper, weak hive, and let them get used to each other. What's going to happen is you're going to have 30 frames, right, on 3 deeps. I wait until they all get to know each other well. The newspaper's all eaten up by the bees and gotten out of the hive. I'll look for the 20 best frames with resources and brood. That's going to go in my 2 deeps. The other 10 frames I'm going to either store, freeze, save for the spring, and I'm going to brush all my bees off of the top deep and make them all go into the 2 deeps. And then I'll feed them all winter. That works for me, JR. Hope that's helpful. Jen, queen finally started laying after Apogard treatment. Oh, really? Apogard made it so that would be thymol. Made it stop laying. Okay. Have 2 full frames of cap brood. How many frames of cap brood will I need to have strong hive for the winter? Not sure where you live, but again, if you're in the Midwest or North, you're going to need about 4 to 6 frames of brood, bees of winter physiology. That would give you about 36,000 or more bees, to make it through winter. So I need about 40,000 bees of winter physiology. And so you need about 4 to 6 frame of brood. That's my calculation. That varies on how intense or long-lasting your winters are. Here where I live, we have about 5 months of winter. So the bees have to endure a long winter consuming a lot of food. Yep. All right, let's see. Did I just answer this? No, it almost sounds like I did. Let me check. Yeah, I answered the question on the 5-frame nuke box. Okay. Here's John. Hello, David. How would you handle a yellow jacket around your hive? Thank you. A yellow jacket around my hive. If it's just one, maybe I would just let the bees kill it. I mean, they're not going to let it come in. It's over. But normally there's not just one, there's a bunch, and that's tough. Some of you live in states where yellow jackets are a huge issue. We have a lot of them in Illinois, but they're not bothering my bees that much. Bees take care of them. I would reduce the entrance. That's going to be less space where, the yellow jacket could gain entry past the guard bees. So reduce it. There are yellow jacket traps, but you want to get those where they don't also trap honeybees, right? So it's tough. I don't have a good answer for you other than reducing your entrance to avoid yellow jackets having free reign to get into your hive like that. What would happen if you used your feeding system with 2 jars? One with 1-to-1 and one with 2-to-1 on a colony with low stores for fall feeding. That would work fine. I never claim to have the answers, the only answer to beekeeping. I never claim to have the corner of all wisdom. So you can do it any way you want to. But here's my suggestion. Well, let me tell you how I do it. I feed my bees in the winter, my winter bee kind. So I'm only feeding them 1-to-1 in the fall so that I can increase the brood production of bees of winter physiology. 2-to-1 is used to increase their food stores, which since I'm feeding them doesn't come into play for me. But yeah, if you're not going to feed your bees this winter and you want them to rely on their food on board, you definitely want to get some 2-to-1 on there. And you can do both at the same time, absolutely. Susan, let's see. I answered this question last night. I'm going to skip that one. You can watch the replay of the live stream last night. Susan was wondering when her new queen will start laying, and I told her it takes about 30 days. But if you want to watch more of the questions that I answered last night on my live stream, I'll leave a link at the end of this video and in the description below. So Mike says, question, can I have a laying worker and a queen in the same colony? I answered this question last night, but I want to circle back and answer more, give more. I thought about this kind of like after the live stream and this morning. So I want to circle back because I said no. If you got a queen in there, you're not going to get laying workers because the queen mandibular pheromone clamps down workers so they don't lay. However, I do want to clarify that you can have laying workers in a hive that has a very prolific mated laying queen. You just don't have that many of them. And their eggs that they laid, unfertilized eggs of course, are quickly culled out. They're just consumed and cannibalized. But there probably are always, I've read the literature that says there are likely laying workers in every hive, even with a strong queen, but you just don't notice it. It's kept under control. And I mean just a few, right? A lot of people think when you get a laying worker, you only have one, but when you have a hive that's showing signs of a laying worker, you usually have a whole bunch of them. You just don't know it. Yeah. All right. Rich says, David, evening, David. First time enjoying this stream. I have purchased your online courses, love it. Any suggestions on organizing all the info I'm learning? I have notes everywhere. Well, gosh, Rich, I'm the same way. I have notes everywhere. I have books. I go to Dollar General, I buy notebooks. Three ring binder notebooks, and I have a 3-ring puncher, hole puncher, and I punch papers, and I take notes. Oh, I've got notes everywhere. I'm not much of a computer guy. Like I love computers. I used to run a computer business. So I have a lot of experience in computers, but I'm not a guy that likes to store and access all my stuff on the computer because I'm a tactile guy. I like feeling of the paper. I like writing with a mechanical pencil. I like typing with a typewriter. I know, I'm a tactile person. So I like notebooks that I can pull off a shelf, laying workers, and I can put all my notes in this 3-ring binder, open it up, and look through my notes on a 3-ring binder rather than go to my computer and have to look up a file. I do both, don't get me wrong, but I'd say the note-taking notebooks is the answer for me. I have a lot of scientific notebooks. Is that what you call them? The black and white ones that are bound together that you can buy at Dollar General with a string. I love those scientific notebooks. I have a bunch of those filled up with stuff. I'm taking notes all the time. I really am. Yep. So maybe you're like me and you just want to use a whole bunch of notebooks. I think that might be your answer. Good luck, Rich. All right, Brian, what are your thoughts on feeding excess honey back to the hive in the fall instead of 1-to-1 sugar water. That'll work. Yeah, that's fine. Save it, put it in, I would do it from the top, not the entrance, but top feed them like our Burns feeder boards. You can put the feeders in there, fill them up with honey. They'll just stick their proboscids up there and enjoy the honey. Now, all the scientific people that are watching this that are well knowledgeable of American foul brood might panic right now and say, oh my gosh, you should never feed bees honey because it could have spores of American foul brood and get your bees all sick. So, fair enough. You need to make sure that your honey source is good, that it didn't come from a diseased hive, okay? I'll say that to put everyone that feels scared about the spores being in honey at ease. Make sure your honey is in good shape. Margaret, if the bees couldn't defend their honey super due to wax moth, will I be able to give the super back full of honey for the winter? Interesting. Interesting. I am interested in this question. I want to unravel it like a detective because this honey it couldn't be defended by wax moth. Usually wax moth will damage that the frames, the comb and all, but it sounds like it's full of honey and you're wondering if you can give it back to them. So maybe there was partial damage or maybe you just saw some. What I'm concerned about, Margaret, are you sure that it wasn't small hive beetle larvae? Because small hive beetle love honey supers, you know? Yeah. So I'm wondering if it was small hive beetle. Small hive beetle larvae are a little bit smaller and they have the little spiky parts to them that you can see on the larvae that you don't see on the wax moth. So I'm a little bit iffy on, but I'm assuming that you know what wax moths are and you saw the wax moth larvae. You know, you don't have to see the adults necessarily, but maybe you saw it and now you're wondering what to do. Definitely freeze it as soon as you can. That's going to kill any eggs, either it's small hive beetle or wax moth larvae eggs. All stages of those pests will be killed. And then after 2 or 3 days in the freezer, you can store it. And yeah, you can give it back to your bees for winter if you want to. That'll work. I do want to say this caveat. If it's significantly damaged by wax moth, bees are slower to get on it. They don't like the smell or the wax moth defecate, small hive beetle do too, and it's ferment. So bees are slow to get back on these frames that have been damaged by these pests. So be aware of that. Yeah, just know that it may not work out as well as you would hope. Alrighty. How long can I leave half-capped frames of honey and nectar in a freezer before harming them? Thanks. Never going to harm them, Timmy. Nope. I learned this from a beekeeper, well-known, Gene Killian, over in Paris, Illinois. Passed away, but I was at his place once and he showed me how he freezes his comb honey. He was well known for comb honey. And he would freeze it and he said it's just fine when you take it out of the freezer. I've experimented with it. I do that all the time. I reuse honey frames, put it in the freezer. It's good. It's like it just holds it there till you want to use it again. Don't worry about it. Phil, thanks for your teaching. Does a queen lay in queen cups? Or did I just answer that? Let me check. I'm pretty sure I just answered that. Yeah. I've already answered that question. Okay, good. I thought I did. Got in there twice on me. Okay, so here's a question. Please answer about strange smelling hives and if the aster honey stops stinking. A different question, but I already answered it. Worded a little differently, I guess. Okay, how long do you keep the robbing screens on in the fall? Now, that's a good question. Robbing screen, for those of you that are new to beekeeping or thinking about getting into beekeeping, don't know this term, robber bees don't necessarily have to be that, they don't have to be from beekeepers in your area. Some people make that mistake. As I said on the live stream last night, some people think there's no beekeepers anywhere around me, so I don't have to worry about my bees getting robbed. That's not true because within a 3-mile radius of you, which is thousands of acres, there could be trees and barns and places where there are hives that those hives could come rob your hives, or even your own hives could rob each other. So you're never out of the woods on this robbing issue. And how long should you keep the robbing screens on in the fall? It's really going to be until you feel like the bees have gotten cold enough, clustered enough that they're not going to be looking to rob hives anymore. Not a cookbook science. It's not a really definite date, but it's more like bees are just done foraging. So usually after my first hard frost, I'm pretty much out of the woods of bees robbing each other out. Yeah. Mike, Thanks for the question for the green chair. Oh, I love it, Mike. You know the green chair question thing, huh? Okay. What are your thoughts on frame holders? Okay, love them and I hate them. Frame holders are little devices that you hook onto the side of your opened hive, and usually they slip down inside the wall of the hive to support themselves. And two prongs come out where you can set your frame in there. If you pull a frame out, you can set it outside the hive and let it hang there. The frame hanger holder. I love them because I like how they work. I hate them because I lose them. I own 3 and I can't find a 1. Now the hives down there have those Be Smart hive stands under them, and they come with frame hangers, holders. And I like that, only I bump into them and knock them off and I lose those. I'm losing them. I wind up taking my frames out, and you see it in my videos. I just set it aside on its, put my frame on the ground and lean it up against the hive. I don't like that because bees can walk off of it onto the side of the box, or you can lose or damage your queen doing that. But mostly what happens to me, I get grass on it. And when I pick it up, the wax kind of grabs grass. I got to pluck the grass off. You know, have you ever thought about how much work bees have to go through to pull one blade of grass out of the hive? Seriously, it'd be like you pulling out a huge, huge board out of your attic, and you got to take it out the basement door. You know, it's just so much work. So I don't like to give any more debris into my hive when I'm working them than I have to. But I think if you're better than I am at not losing your stuff in the bee yard, frame hangers, holders are really good. I like the metal ones. Yeah, they work out really good. All right, here we are. Lamar, will bees abscond if the hive gets wet and some comb gets moldy? They could. You never know what bees are going to do. You know, if they get wet enough and moldy enough, of course they would. But I would say, like in our house or your house, if your house had a leak and then it got moldy, you would stop the leak and get vinegar and bleach, and you would get rid of the mold. You wouldn't just leave your house. It's too much invested in your home. Bees are the same way. They've invested so much in the comb that they've drawn out, the frames, the brood is in there, honey's in there, so they're going to just clean it up. So it depends on how bad, how wet it is. Yeah. All right, let's see where we're at now. I need to number these. Make sure I haven't gone through all these already. Don't think I have. Okay, Lisa, how do you know when to leave supers on? If you do you leave the queen excluder? And can you do the mite treatment with the super on? Oh my gosh, I love this question, Lisa. Thanks so much for asking it. I was amazed last night. So many good questions during the live stream. And one of the things that I noticed last night was how many people ask very basic, very simple questions. And I love it. I love that. I like it. I know some experienced beekeepers probably think, what? Everybody should know that. But look, I respect, you know, we all start somewhere and we don't know much when we start. It takes a while to learn everything. Gosh. So whenever somebody asks a very simple, basic question, I love it. And there's a basic question in here that I want to address because not everybody knows it. And I often say this in my video too, because I know people don't know it. But let's just take it apart step by step. You've got about 3 or 4 different questions here. How do you know when to leave the supers on? I have 2 deeps, and then I use a super on top of my 2 deeps. Now, we're in the US, I'm in the US. You may be watching like from the UK or something, so you have different terminology that you use for super and boxes, and your boxes are different sizes usually. But anyway, let me explain my setup for those of you that aren't from the US. 2 deeps, the deep box, we usually use terms like deep to refer to our brood area. The deep is a bigger box. It's a Langstroth box, and it's 9 5/8 inches high. And that's what we call a deep. The next box in size would be a medium, and that's usually what we put our honey in, the medium honey super. It's 6 5/8, and we call that a super. Now I know in the UK, I've been told that you may call all your boxes a super, and you can. You know, that's what a box is. It's a super. But we distinctively separate brood or super that way, honey super. So when Lisa asks this super, she's meaning a honey super. The other thing is in the US, not everybody follows the 2 deep and the honey super method. Many beekeepers use all medium boxes. And so therefore you wouldn't really want to call them supers in the US because you can't call them deeps. They're not deep anymore. So we call them brood boxes. I know it's crazy. You almost have to ask somebody, well, You know, what are your brood boxes? Are they deeps or mediums in something? There's even shallow boxes that some people still use even more. Oh, let's get back to the question. So how do you know when to leave a super on? Well, since I feed my bees in the wintertime, my winter bee kinds, I'm not too concerned about them having extra super on board of honey, but I do usually leave, most of my hive are left with the honey super on for added insurance of food, but I also feed them my winter bee kind. So it's kind of your call. If you're not going to feed them, they need that super probably. If you're going to feed them, they may not need that honey super. Yep. Do you leave the queen excluder? I love that question because the answer is no. Let me look at that airplane. It looks like a very low flying fighter jet, which I don't see that often around here, but it's going pretty fast. Could be, it's just amazing. I'm really into aviation, so when I see things like that, I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. But I know I'm making a video unedited, so I can't just get distracted. But that's really cool. All right, well, we'll let it go. I live way out in the middle of nowhere, not near an airport, and so when I see low-flying airplanes, it intrigues me. Okay, so the queen excluder, no, you can't leave that on during the wintertime. What happens in the wintertime when you leave a queen excluder on? The queen can get stuck below it. Of course, you're excluding her down below, and then when the colony moves up in the cluster, the winter cluster, boy, that can really be bad because they will just let the queen stay down there with a few bees, but not enough bees to keep her warm. And so what happens, she'll perish down there and you'll lose your queen, and that would be bad. The plane is actually coming around here. Wow. I'm going to swing my camera so you can see it, okay? This would be cool. I've not seen a plane like this. That's why it's intriguing to me. Oh, it's got two props on it. It's kind of low. See that? That's why I thought it's really unusual, isn't it? Isn't that cool? Sorry. Oh yeah, I'll have to do a little investigation. My brother's a commercial pilot. I'll ask him all about it. Give me a minute to reset here. It's raw and unedited, and there's airplanes flying over. So sorry. So you don't. Oh, that's a little bit too high, isn't it? Let's set that down a hair. Okay. So you don't want your queen excluder to go through the winter because it's going to isolate your queen down below, and that can hurt her and kill her. She'll get too cold and die down there. So the second part of your question, Lisa, is more complex. Now that we got the aviation part of the video out of the way, we can address, can you treat mites with the supers on? You notice in my videos, I don't address treatments a lot, and here's why. Because let's say I'm filming this in 2024, right? So if I give treatment guidelines of the way to treat in 2024, labels change. And so we might find that in 5 years, in 2029, the label has changed, but you may watch this video and take my advice and how you use that product, and it's 5 years old and you're going to do it wrong. So that's why I don't like to, I know this is kind of dated, so I don't want to give treatment. I don't want to talk about the label that can easily change from year to year. So I will say this though, now that it's 2024, in this moment in time, Lisa, you can use Formic Pro with your honey supers on, and you can use oxalic acid with your honey supers on. Most of the other treatments require that you do not treat with the honey supers on, although some may be marginal, but most of the others require that you take the honey supers off and keep them off a certain amount of time even after you've treated to let it kind of disperse before you put it back on. I hope that helps you out. All right. Eric. Hey, Eric, I have one hive doing great and the other not so good. Should I dispatch the weak hive queen and combine them? I like your word dispatch. I don't like to say the word kill either. You know, should I kill the queen? That sounds so brutal. But dispatch sounds kind of nice, doesn't it? It sounds more gentle, I guess. But I don't know how great your great hive is, and I don't know how weak your weak hive is. I wish I was there with you. I could look at it and decide. But here's the deal, I think, for you, Eric. I think I'd err on the side of combining it. Obviously, you're savvy enough to know they're weak, right? And if they're weak, they may not make it through winter. So you're going to be left with your great hive going through winter, which may or may not make it, 50% chance that it could die. So I guess if I was you, I'd be tempted to combine them. Because what you can do, Eric, is you can always split them again when it comes spring again, and you'll be back to having two hives again. Yeah. All right, good question. And now have a question for Todd. I have a car parked right up against my camera, and they are leaving. So this is raw and unedited. That's why you're going to hear a car crank up and drive away. We have airplanes, we have cars. Hey, that's what happens when it's raw and unedited, okay? Okay. Todd, hey David, got my empty winter be kind today. My question is about screen bottom boards. Do you block the entire screen for winter or leave part or fully open? That's a really good question because the screen bottom board, I like the ventilation that it provides in the winter. So see this piece of paper, the sides of it? Something about this size, a little bit bigger, can slide into your screen, and I've made videos on this, and I like to leave about an inch where the screen is open for ventilation. So what I slide in there can be like a hard piece of plastic or something, you know, like a poster board plastic. And then this board is right below where the bees are clustered for winter. And then you can take it out when you want to. So, but in fairness and in all transparency, I have a combination of solid bottom boards, fully open screen bottom boards all winter, and then partially blocked off bottom boards. And what I found is none of those have any bearing on the success of my overwintering my bees. What does bring success is a very good laying queen, lots of bees, a winter physiology that I raise by feeding them in the fall, and then also I got to have low mite count to cut down on viruses killing my bees in the winter. And so those three things are significant. More important than the hive configuration, really, it is. The queen, how well she's laying, the brood itself, bees' winter physiology, and of course, mites under control and good nutrition all winter long is really going to help your bees make it through winter. Hope that answers your question, Todd. Rick, is Super DFM a product that is worth using in my hives for bee digestive health? I've asked a lot of brilliant people this question. I've read a lot of articles on it. I feel like I'm almost friends with different DFM people that I see as vendors at different conferences that I go to. We talk a lot. You know what? I've never used it. It's a probiotic type, and I just have never used it, so I really cannot say 100%. I'm going to leave this up to you. I think, Rick, you're going to have to get some and try it and see if it's something that you like. I've read articles and different work that says, yes, it's great. I've heard others said they didn't see a difference. I do want to say something else about it, but I think it's going to be up to you to make that decision. Now, I will say this. I will say that I'm not saying this about DFM or different companies that make it, but I will say there's a lot of stuff coming out in the bee world now, and not all of it has data. I don't know, DFM may have data, but let's say some companies don't have the data to show that it does or doesn't work, right? Now, I'm not saying that DFM does or doesn't. I don't know personally if they do, but I'm saying that sometimes I've heard people say, show me the data, I'll be a believer. Show me the simple scientific data and convince me. But just because somebody doesn't have the data doesn't mean it's bad or doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means they don't have the money or don't want to put the money into getting the data. You understand what I'm saying? So it still could be very productive material, very useful material, but they aren't going to make enough profit to ever pay for all the money they had to spend to actually go into the data. So that's the thing that is challenging. I've heard a lot of beekeepers love the DFM. If DFM is something that you want to try, I'd say try it. Try to keep track of if you can tell a difference in your bees' performance after you give it to them. Marianne Livingston, hoping someone can answer this. If honey is being put in to an everclear based tincture, will the tincture still stay shelf stable? Both are shelf stable in itself. Okay, so wow, that's pretty cool, Marianne. You're putting honey into everclear, very potent alcohol. Of course they would both stay stable. I think you could put anything in everclear and it's going to stay stable. Don't know for sure how that all works out, but I'm more curious about what you're going to be using that for. It sounds really cool. All right, question. Are quilt boxes useful or useless? Quilt boxes, for those of you that may be new to the quilt box terminology, it's more associated with a warre hive, W-A-R-R-E. Warre hives are top bar hives in a vertical position, like a Langstroth vertical boxes. That's what a worry hive is, only they don't have full frames. They have a top bar that the bees build down their comb on. And so at the top of a worry hive is usually found a quilt box, which is a box. Some people call it a hot box. It's a box that has a fabric on the bottom, sometimes like cloth or burlap. And that cloth, usually above it in the box, has wood chips or extra additional cloth to absorb moisture. So this all depends whether it's useful or useless based on what kind of hive you have. What are you doing, right? I use my winter bee kinds to absorb the moisture into the candy to make the candy more edible to the bees all winter. So I absorb moisture that way. A quilt box is useless if I have already placed a winter bee kind board on, because there would be no bees or moisture above the winter bee kind board. It doesn't go through that material or the candy, so it gets absorbed there. But it depends on what kind of material, what kind of your hive configuration is. Yep. Alrighty. How about this? Does the smell from asters, pollen, nectar in the hive dissipate? We've already answered that, haven't we? Yeah, it smells loud. Goldenrod smells loud in the fall, but it gets better. This is a different question. It just gets a little bit less aromatic, I guess, as time goes on, but it can smell again in the spring when bees open it up. Yep. Okay. Calby, how do you go about overwintering a 5-frame nuke box? It was a midsummer split, and they have a frame and a half of capped honey and plenty of pollen and bee bread. Queen is laying good. It depends on where you live. For me, a 5-frame nuke box is tough. I have to really wrap it good. I have to feed it all winter. But if you live where winters aren't that long, you could pull it off. It wouldn't be that bad. Hello, David. How will you handle a yellow jacket? Yellow jackets around your hive? Thank you. Boy, yellow jackets are tough. I'll tell you, John. Best thing I try to do is minimize the entrance, reduce the entrance so that bees have less space to protect. There's yellow jacket traps. You just want to be careful not to get your bees in those. I know some of you live in really heavily infested yellow jacket areas, and it can really be tough. But the best thing to do is let your bees defend themselves against yellow jackets, but reducing your entrance is going to be a great help to you. It really is. There you go. That's a lot of questions. Wow. I actually had to repeat this 3 times to make this video, because the first time my camera that I was using my cell phone, and my cell phone got full of storage and shut off. The second time, my cell phone forgot to charge it last night, ran out of batteries. So this is my 3rd time. So if I made any blunders by repeating and things, I don't recall any more what questions I'd already answered since I did it 3 times. So I really appreciate you guys watching. From the green chair, David Burns, raw and unedited. We had a special airplane flyover. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I know what that airplane was. Yeah. So anyway, and then we had a car drive off that was parked next to the camera. So that just emphasizes how raw and unedited things are here at the Honeybee Farm. But I do appreciate you joining me today. Also, I answered a lot of questions last night during the live stream. I'd like for you to watch that if you missed it. I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can just join me right over here for the live stream replay. See you guys over there. Oh boy, that was tough. Having to do this thing 3 times was a killer.